This is Dentist Money. Now, here's your host, Reese Harper.
Welcome to the Dentist Money Show, where we help dentists make smart financial decisions. I'm your host, Reese Harper, here with my trusty old co-host, Sir Ryan Isaac.
Also known as Gator.
Yeah, you'd like to be known as Gator.
Gator's boys don't play.
We're not letting you have a new nickname anymore.
We talked about this, and can I suggest one?
Okay.
So the guys upstairs said that capital gains, but gains with a Z, the workout reference. Can I be known as Capital Gains?
If you pick your own nickname that you want to be
chose
called,
it for me. No, they
does
chose
that actually count?
It's called self-glossing. You can't self-gloss, but I loved it. It's very financial and gym appropriate.
We'll see if it sticks.
Capital Gains. Let's vote. Can we
We'll
put a
see
survey
if it-
on?
but
Can we put a
let's-
survey on the website?
Let's see if it sticks based on whether you promote it or it's natural and organic.
Well, I'm gonna slip it in there.
I was just thinking about the episode of Seinfeld where George wants to give himself a nickname of T-Bone.
T-Bone, it ends up
And
with
by
Coco.
the end, it's Coco.
Yeah, it'll backfire.
It's gonna backfire, dude.
backfire.
Don't push too hard.
But I appreciate it.
Let
Shout
it
out to the guys
evolve.
upstairs.
Let it evolve. If it happens, it happens. But the universe come to you, dude.
It did. In the name of... Actually, you know what's funny? I called one of our clients the other day for a phone meeting we had, and the office manager picked up. I told her who I was. She said, "Oh, is this Sir? The office manager."
No way.
I was like, "Oh,
That's
no.
awesome.
How did
Good.
that happen?"
Well done.
Well,
Well, today is an episode that's quickly becoming one of the favorite
Hottest
episodes we
downloads.
do, which is the Q&A episode, where we take all the questions that have come in from the last month or a few weeks, basically. I don't know when the last one we did. Did we do one a month ago?
yeah,
or?
they're happening monthly.
Okay, so
Time's flying by when you're having fun.
we have to filter down a little bit, and we pick the ones that we feel like are the most applicable.
Yep.
And so shout out to everyone for sending in your Q&A questions. We really
Where can they
appreciate
do
it. We really appreciate it.
Q, where do they send questions?
Yeah, on the website, dentistadvisors.com. If you go to the podcast page, there's a big button that says submit question to podcast, and it makes it real easy just to submit a real quick form with your question.
Great. We love it. Send them.
10-4.
And if you want to vote on my nickname, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we'll definitely have that quiz up there.
The quiz is coming. All right, question number 1. This is a pretty common question about, especially around tax time, for those of you with children. The question it comes from an orthodontist in the Midwest. Thank you, Midwest orthodontist. How do I know the difference between a Roth for kids versus paying for their education directly versus a 529 or other options? So it's basically, if I want to pay my kids, there's two parts of this question.
Wait. What did he say? Did he ask at the beginning if I want to pay my kids? What did he say at the beginning about
How do I know the difference? It's more, where do I put the money when I pay my kids? But
Okay,
I think
so
there's more parts
there's an
to this
assumption he's saying, I'm already paying my kids. I just want to know where to put the money that I'm paying.
Roth versus direct paying the education the schools directly.
So
or
the
529.
right answer is ask the person you're paying what they want to do with the money, because you can't make that decision for them since it's their money that you paid them. I mean, let's get this just like straight.
There's a
fine line here.
yes.
All right, between
You cannot circumvent tax laws by taking a tax break, paying your kids, and then taking the money from them for personal expenses.
yeah, like that. This is a gray area, folks.
Don't do
And
that.
I was just at a conference recently where I heard that I heard someone advocating for you can easily pay your children the maximum amount of the standard deduction, and then
Just
which
take the money.
this year I think is, what is it?
It's 12,000.
So it's 12,000.
It doubled from last year.
Yeah, so it's
for
big.
kids. Yeah.
So I heard at a conference recently a CPA say that you could pay this maximum wage base and then go spend the money on trips to Florida, whatever. Like, that was basically the takeaway. And
Yeah.
all I'm saying is, like, if you haven't ever been audited, okay, and for those of us who have been audited, you're not going to be able to have your CPA be like, yeah, their 4-year-old is doing a great job at cleaning the
Yeah,
office.
she earned that $12,000.
Pays her $1,000 a month for that, and of course she uses the money to go on her annual trip to Florida, because that's what that 4-year-old's choosing to do with the money. I'm not saying don't pay your kids. Like, that is a decision between you and your CPA.
And your 1-year-old.
Okay,
Honey, do you want to get paid $1,000 a month? Dad. Yes, yeah.
Do you want to be gainfully employed? I mean, there's precedent for paying for certain things, and at a certain dollar amount, and probably in your market that's differently than in someone else's market. You just have to feel comfortable, and I think that's why we're spending a little bit of initial time on this.
This is the preface.
And I'm also going to say that this can be a fairly significant tax savings, to be thoughtful about this and actually come up with the right number and the right job description for the right age of person in your family, right?
Okay, yeah. So
like, it's a pretty significant deal if you can come up with the right dollar amount for the right person at the right age in their life and the right job description. Like, it is a significant savings.
Yeah.
And they can use that money for whatever they choose to use it for. It just gets difficult when they're 6 months old.
Like, you go on it's like every 2 weeks at the grocery store, you bring the whole family. Did everyone bring their UTMA accounts? Does everyone have their debit cards for their UTMA accounts?
Yeah.
You're paying for $200 of groceries and you're paying for $200. I mean,
I know it works. Like, I mean, the really question with a lot of these things is just how, like, it's like the same thing with the home office deduction. Yeah. It's the same thing with commute and travel. In principle, I like the idea of my kids paying their own dang grocery bill. Yeah,
they eat so much food.
They could pay their own rent. You could start charging them rent at an early age. There's nothing wrong with that.
It just happens to pay for your mortgage. So here's the bottom line: is before you start paying your kids through your business, talk to your CPA. Not listen to a CPA or an accountant type person give a speech to somebody. Talk to the guy whose name has to be next to yours on the tax return, who will also be held responsible for your decisions.
Yeah, because
talk to that guy. Because
he's going to be the one that on your behalf interacts with the IRS and describes the positions that you took, right? And that's the reality is he's the person that will be your agent in between you and the auditor. And that's an actual real thing, okay? And it happens, and you'll get an auditor assigned to you, and they'll schedule an appointment, and you'll have to either show up and talk to them, or they will talk to your agent. And if the agent that you work with, your CPA, is uncomfortable with the positions that you've been taking, that audit's not going to go very well.
It just still comes back to you.
So ultimately, I would say that's the first principle of this question.
Okay, that's the disclaimer. Let's just assume we're going to pay kids through the business. And it was just kind of the assumption of this question. You can pay them up to $12,000 this year per kid.
Well, let's not assume. Let's assume that you are paying. You've chosen to pay your kids through the business.
Okay.
Because that's the position you want to take.
Yes.
Because your kids are actually going to do something, and you're going to be able to justify their wage.
Okay.
We're not saying that everyone should even do that. Like, there is a fair amount of complexity to that choice right there. Mm-hmm. So let's just say that you've made that choice.
You've made the decision to do that. Here's the question. Where do you put the money? I'm going to give you 4 different places where your money could go. I'm going to start with the most basic, most flexible, easiest place, and we'll kind of work our way up. And let's talk about the pros and cons of doing them.
Okay.
For where your kids' money can go.
Okay.
You got a smile on your face.
Yeah.
You're excited about this?
Well, I'm hoping we start with the old checking account.
Yes.
Okay.
Ding, ding. Where's your bell?
I don't know. I
You
need
used to have like a chime.
my chimes. Where's my C for chi?
Yeah, you pay your kids. What are the pros and cons of a checking and savings account?
Well, I get maximum flexibility, and I have maximum liquidity. It's also giving me like the easiest access to the cash.
Spending.
And it's more practical. Yeah. Like, no matter what, in my opinion, you have to have one of these. So you need to have for most people, it's going to be a savings account because they're too young to even qualify for a checking account with your bank in some cases. But you're going to have a savings account or a checking account, and that's going to fund one of many investment accounts that we're going to go through now.
Let's go to the next one, which would be a brokerage account. Now, this can be a brokerage. This is like an after-tax brokerage account. It can be in the parent's name. We have some clients who just open a brokerage account, put money in there that they'll use for future kids' stuff.
Yeah.
Or you can open it in your kid's name, which is called UTMA. It's a DATMA.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of using a brokerage account for kids' savings.
Well, now I have some investment options.
Yeah.
I can actually
That's
buy
the
some
con of
things.
using checking savings. There are no investment options.
Yeah.
And there's no tax advantage
Yep.
either. Let's just mention that.
And
brokerage account, you can invest in whatever you want.
Yep.
So now you can teach your kids about investments.
Yep.
Okay, so brokerage account, they're probably the most flexible option out there for investments, and there's no limits, there's no penalties for moving money in and out. There is, I guess, it's not really a con, but the only thing to mention, there is no favorable tax treatment for you or your kid for putting money in a brokerage account.
Nope.
Okay. Number 3 be the mighty Roth IRA.
Well, when you say that, the tax treatment of
It comes from paying
shifting money from you to your child for doing work and letting them spend it on things you would have already spent it on yourself, like that's the major tax savings.
You're saying if you put money in a kid's UTMA and then spend it on family spending.
Or personal checking account. I mean, the simplest version here is have them do some gainfully employed labor and put it in a checking account and
make
have
them buy their
spend it.
own school clothes.
Make them buy their own school clothes. Make them pay for their own
Yeah.
private tuition for private school. Make them, pay for their own gas. Make them pay for their own movie tickets. Make them pay for their own
Yeah.
cell phone. My kid's paying for his own cell phone plan. I don't pay for his own phone. He's got a really crappy flip phone that he hates, and I'm like, as soon as you want to pay $50 a month for data,
Yeah.
and
my
he's
guess.
like, well, I have to mow like 4 lawns to get $50. I'm like, welcome
Yeah.
to my world, son.
Well,
I had to
no,
work
he needs
for-
to mow like 8 because half of it has to be saved. He's got a 50%
Yeah.
savings rate. He's
Yeah.
$100 a month to get
Yeah.
that data plan.
I'm like, yeah, welcome to the adult life. You have to work 10 years, and when you get done with school, you have $700,000 in student loans. That's life, all right? That's
Okay.
the old dental school.
Roth IRA, what are the pros of a Roth giving so you pay now for your kids to put money in a Roth IRA, they have to be employed. So they have to have earned income to put the money in a Roth IRA. So a Roth option is only for those who are actually paying their kids through the business. Mm-hmm. So what's the pros? What are the pros of a Roth IRA for a kid?
The Roth IRA allows you to grow your money, obviously, without paying taxes on any of the capital gains or growth when you're at retirement. But it also has some exceptions that you'll be able to pull your money out for.
Yeah. Surprisingly flexible to
Yeah.
pull your own contributions out. And there is a list of exceptions to the rule that you can even pull out
Gains.
without penalty in some circumstances, but they're pretty flexible for your own just base contributions.
Yeah, and what are those?
What do you mean?
What are the exceptions?
Oh, I mean, there's education's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's medical. I think there's house.
The ones that are most applicable is the first time home purchase
Yeah.
and the school expenses and
Yeah.
medical
And
expenses.
medical. Yeah.
And those are fairly generous,
They are.
and for most people, you could use those by the time you're 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Roth is probably the most advantageous for a child if you're trying to find a way for them to fund college or fund the first part of their life and kind of the major expenses that are going to come up. A Roth's actually pretty advantageous.
Yeah, it is. The cons to a Roth, there's annual limits.
Yep.
So if you pay him $12,000, you can't put all $12,000 in there. It's the limit of $5,500.
I mean, if they choose to work for you at the rate of $12,000 a year.
If you give your 6-month-old baby $12,000,
I'm just saying we got to,
Hey, you took a picture and you put it on Facebook for marketing. So
Yes.
hey.
It's their choice to work for you too, by the way. It's not your choice to force them to. Otherwise, it
At will.
invalidates it.
Okay. Last one would be the 529 plan. Every state has kind of a different plan. There are some states give slight state tax credits when you contribute to these. But what are the pros of a 529?
Well, for me personally, I get state tax credit, so I want to put at least
Enough to max it
enough
out.
in to get my state tax credit. What that means is, if you put in like $1,000, you might get $50 back from the state you live in, or if you put in $3,000, you might get $200.
And these vary
back.
by state.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to your state's 529 website, and
Yep.
you can use other states' 529s too.
Yeah.
Some have like better reputations than others.
Most people don't realize that their state even has a state-specific 529 plan. For example, in California, your state-specific plan has advantages, and in Utah, my state-specific plan has advantages to me, and those are mostly on the front end of your contribution, you're going to get some tax credit, which is different than a deduction. And so I think you'd want to max that out.
Again, that's another CPA question too. If you still qualify for the credit, I don't know if there's phase outs for those credits. I don't know if that's changed at all.
Yeah,
there's income phase outs for those tax credits or not.
In some case, in some states,
I think
it's different than others, right? And so, and it's just going to depend on your income level, because this is a state tax credit, not a federal tax credit.
Yeah. So the downsides to a 529, they're not as flexible, right? In terms of what you can use the money for. They have to be used for qualified education experiences. You can pass them to other kids if one kid doesn't use it.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder though, like, what does that mean? And it's fairly flexible relating to school life. Yes. I mean, rent,
and became more flexible
expenses,
with the new tax plan too.
Yeah, computers, software, tutoring. There's a laundry list of items, and it's basically like almost, I don't know what one of our listeners' kids who are going to college wouldn't be able to. I mean, if you're going to college, like, you're going to be able to use it.
There's going to be reasons to use it.
So,
okay. So that'd be, I guess, the only downside. It's just not quite as flexible. I think you could argue too that some states, this is where some states excel above others. Some states' plans don't have the best investment options.
Yeah.
The investment mix inside of there.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
You're going to have better investment flexibility inside of the UTMA or the brokerage account or the Roth IRA than you probably will inside the 529. However, if your state has a low cost index that's not a, if you have a low cost indexing option, that, it's probably an acceptable choice in order to pick up that tax credit, in my opinion. Just because we're dealing with such small dollars in most cases, those tax credits really add up for people. So, what's the general advice you'd give someone if they're saying, okay, I've got all these options, like, what do I do? Like, which ones am I going to use? Because you gave a bunch of pros and cons, but if someone says, hey, I want to put $10,000 away a year for my kids, and I've got a 9-year-old, and they are doing some work for me at the office to receive most of that income or all that income, and I want to save money for them. What do you say?
It depends on the amount of money. So if you say it's $10,000,
I'm saying it's. Did I say 10
you
or
just
9?
Said 10.
Okay, 10.
A 9-year-old kid, $10,000.
Okay, 10.
I passed this test.
Okay,
I studied. So that's a significant amount of money for a kid. You can spread that around to a few different accounts that would be advantageous for different reasons. I would for sure put some in a checking account, so they can learn how to spend some money. I like the idea of a Roth. You can still hit that maximum and still have money outside of it left over. So you could hit your $5,500 in a Roth. You could put $1,000 to your checking account. Yeah. And then you'd have a couple grand left over for, you could talk to your CPA if you are going to hit the state tax credit for your income and your situation. You could use a 529. I'd probably just still use a brokerage account, honestly. I just like the flexibility of a brokerage account. So I'd probably go checking, brokerage, and Roth. Okay. Me personally.
Okay. Ask me the same question.
Reese, it's a 10-year-old kid, and you're going to pay him $9,000.
Okay. Jeez. Tricky. The way I would think about this is I would say I would first back out, because here's the thing that I've learned about kids' college.
It's not fair when you go first, because then you can make your answer fancier than mine.
Well, no, you give me a different set of facts and it'll be different. That's true. So I'm going to answer this differently so that it's not repeating the same thing, because I think your opinion is really valid.
Thank you. I needed that.
But I think that most people start funding kids and they kind of do it all at the same time. Like, it's like time to think about kids. You don't usually go like time to think about one child. I don't get clients being like, it's time for us to think about Tyler's college, but not Sally's. Or, so at the time you got to look at it and kind of say, I've got a 2-year-old, I've got a 19-year-old, I've got a 7-year-old. You got to look at how much time you have.
You're going to have kids in your house forever.
Between, now, okay. You got to look at how much time you've got between their age now and the time they're going to need to start spending money.
Yeah.
And then I just want, like, this is the simple math of an aging father. I just want to give, like, my kids the same amount of money.
Are you putting your desk?
So I'm kind of being equal.
Okay.
And being
what most people
being equal though doesn't mean let's put $100 a month away per kid. Because if I do that and I'm putting $100 away for my 3-year-old and $100 away for my 9-year-old, I'm gonna have different amounts of money by the time that they're 18. So I would just want to say, hey, you know what? I want to give everyone $25,000. Like, that's my my goal. Let's just say I want to have 1 year of kind
Trying
of
to fund it like a defined benefit plan.
one kind of college year. So I'm going to take my, whatever age they are, and I'm going to divide that by the number of months I have left before they get to be 18.
Yeah.
And
Save
then
accordingly.
And then I save accordingly. And so if
build a spreadsheet
if I
for
were
that.
to say how I would fund each kid, it would be based on how much time does each kid have until they get to that age, because there's really no point in doing like a 529 really doesn't have a lot of value if I don't have a long time to get some tax deferral. All it does is complicate my education savings. And if I'm not getting a tax credit and I'm not getting any deferral and I'm picking worse investments, then I might not use that.
Yeah.
But in my personal case, I've started fairly young with most of my kids to just give them that minimum amount that gives me my state tax credit. It'll never be enough to get me to that goal of how much I want to give to each kid, let's say of the 25,000, because I mean, if my state only allows me to put in like, I think it's like $200 a year, right? And I get like a $200 tax credit. And if I'm starting at 6 or 7 or 8, which is when I started with with my oldest child, right? I really don't have quite enough time, quite enough money. So I end up supplementing the funding with the Roth.
Yep.
And then I don't usually I didn't end up using a brokerage account for my kids because I started early enough and I was able to get enough away for them. Like I'm not trying to put $200,000 away for each of my kids for college. Some people really value that. And if you do, the only place you're going to be able to do that effectively is a 529 or a brokerage account.
Yep.
And so, I would say it just depends on the dollar amount. Start with a dollar amount.
And the age of the kid.
How much do you want to get away? And then back into the age of the kid and figure out the monthly savings amount. And then you can kind of pick your account based on the pros and cons of what we talked about. But I think it's an easier way to do college planning and just get everyone a similar amount of money by the time they get to where you want them to
Do the kids have to earn the money that goes into the 529 the same way they do the money that goes into a checking?
That's a good question. The Roth, out of all those options, is the only one where they have to have an earned income to have their own Roth account to put money into.
All right, we've got our second question that came in from, looks like someone in the Army.
Yeah.
That's in Hawaii.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you for your service.
We love you.
here's the question. Hello, Reese and Sir Ryan Isaac.
He meant to say capital gains.
He did not mean that.
You're right.
I'm a dentist with the Army, and I had dental school paid for on an HPSP, which is a health profession scholarship program, for those of you who do not know. I had school paid for on an HPSP contract, and now I'm in my payback time. Most of the young dentists in my profession have come into the service through the same channel. So as military members, we have the option to stay in the service for 20 years in order to retire with a pension. We have free health care for our families. We also have access to the TSP, which is a thrift savings plan, for those of you who don't know.
It's like the 401k of military.
Which for government employees generally, I think. So which allows us to invest in a Roth or traditional IRA up to about $13,000 a year, as opposed to the lower cap which practitioners on the civilian side have. These are really unique opportunities. However, our salaries are less on average than our civilian counterparts, around $86,000 per year as a captain, with regular raises as we accumulate rank and time in service. He's basically saying, as we're thinking about our options in the Army versus separating and going down into private practice, he's trying to understand the financial ramifications of each choice. Staying in the military offers stability and security, but separating exposes us to much greater risks and uncertainty, but also offers the potential for greater financial rewards. It would be super informative to have your perspective on the financial consequences, or on the finances of a conscientious career, which is the Army dentist track. How does that stack up to the finances of a typical conscientious private sector dentist, as well as getting a little bit of insight in how to manage the transition from government service to private practice? Please consider doing a show on these topics. And we just did, or we're about to.
Here we go.
He also said, I love tuning into your podcast and appreciate your effort in providing such a valuable resource to the profession. Which I really appreciated him saying that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We read compliments on air twice.
I don't always feel like this is appreciated based on the comments that sometimes we get through Facebook. So I really do appreciate it.
I thought one of my takeaways is a perk of being in the military is you get to call everybody else civilians.
Yeah, I love that actually.
Yeah.
I always noticed that.
Thank you.
Civilian
From one
dentist.
civilian to a captain. We liked that.
Okay, so here's a few things that stood out to me. And then I want to ask you a question, Reese, on kind of where I would like to take this. And I think that we can make this question generally apply to someone in the military who's thinking about staying or going private practice, and someone who's coming out of school or who's an associate currently and thinking, should I just stay as an associate and keep my job, or should I go own a place? The first few things that I want to point out is he mentioned that you have the Roth option in the government TSP plan. You can do that yourself in a 401k as well. So you can have a 401k at your office and use the Roth option, which gives access to higher limits.
This year it's 16,500.
18.5.
18.5.
Yeah, 18.5. Yeah.
That's
It's
why
early.
you're in charge. As the
No, it's
director of financial
18.5,
planning.
and it's the same for the TSP unless there's a different provision that made him mention 13. I think that was probably just a mistake. It's so you can get access to a Roth 401k option in private practice too. I wanted to mention that the healthcare is a very expensive cost, and it's rising a lot every year. But that the difference of like free healthcare versus the higher income and the asset you can build in private practice isn't even close over a 25-year career. So I wouldn't compare those two, like free healthcare balancing out a much higher income and an asset you build into practice.
But what about the pension?
I don't know how much it is, and so
my guess is it's going to at least be 80 to 85% of his pre-retirement.
Yeah, I don't know how those
it's going to
pensions
be
work.
pretty high.
He said you have to give your 20 years.
Yes,
you have to give your 20 years. So
let's make the assumption, because I'm pretty confident that that's the case. So you're
love to know what
you're picking up it's a very substantial retirement pension.
Okay, so that part does make up a big difference of not having higher income.
Yes,
for sure. Okay.
And that's the trade-off of being a fireman. That's the trade-off of being a police officer. It's the trade-off of serving in the military. You do get a really nice pension.
Okay. So there's a few. Okay. Those are the distinctions I want to make. Here's the question I think would be helpful for us to discuss and for our listeners is, how do you know if you're the person who should go own a business and be in private practice? I mean, like I said, this could be an associate who's wondering if they just stay in their job versus go open a practice. This could be everyone in the military that's wondering the same thing. Do I just stay here and keep the safety and security and stability and lower income versus, like, how do you make that decision? I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to run a business. I'm cut out for this. I should do it.
I might be overreading into this, but when I see the word conscientious, I'm assuming that there's more to his decision than money. I do think there's a reason he went into the military. There's a reason he made that choice. There's probably a lot of joy and fulfillment that is independent of whether I think it's one of those things where if you said, it's sixes financially, which one do you go with?
Yeah.
There's obviously an element here that is driving this person's decision. And I really respect that, because for me, here's what I can say for certainty. Like, no amount of money that you earn in the private sector will really create a true, like, deep sense of fulfillment if that's not what you wanted to do. There's dentists out there that will work for a nonprofit their whole career. There are people that will work for there's community clinics. There's Doctors Without Borders. There's a lot of professions that choose to make less money because of a conscientious decision, or because of an internal set of motivators that is driving them. And I can relate to that too. I'm not driven entirely by money, and I don't think everyone is, but everyone's driven more by money we're driven differently by money than the next person. Meaning, someone might really need to be making $500,000 to $600,000 a year in order to feel like that's the type of life that they were expecting, or that's the expectation that they had, because that's already a setback from what their parents had done or what they saw their grandfather do that they really respected. Or, I mean, there's deep psychology around the benchmarks that we set for what we want to achieve with our financial security. And I think it's often relative to kind of some psychological underpinnings of what we have seen And so it really affects how hard we push and what we want to do. And I think it's important not to ignore that. Don't let making more money push you so hard to where you're forgetting the things that really bring you joy and fulfillment and personal satisfaction, because those are the things you want. You want to arrive at a comfortable income perspective that you're happy with. It's like a little bit of a stretch that you feel like you have extra money and you're doing things more than what you thought you'd ever be able to do. But you're also accomplishing those core goals, those core values, some of those conscientious issues that were in this question. And the private sector will offer a financial opportunity that's quite a bit more significant. And I think that's just way to, for the right person who's motivated by that, the private sector offers more financial upside.
Yeah.
But for you as an individual, depending on how hard you want to push, how interested you are in taking on additional stress and some additional responsibility, it may not be worth it to you, because you could live an excellent life and I mean, an $85,000 to $100,000 a year income with a pension
and no student loans you never had to pay back, and free healthcare.
Yeah, living in Hawaii where the cost of living isn't it's not inexpensive, but if you're on base, there's a lot of other subsidies that we're not really talking about. I think that ultimately there's just a lot of I would make the decision not based on money.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to make it based on money, there's an easy argument to show how it's going to be more lucrative in the private sector.
Would be. You'd end up with a higher note. It does sound, it's probably fair to say, though, that if you spent 20 years, I mean, you had no student loans, you had free healthcare, you had a guaranteed salary and a pension, you will have a fine future. Like, you'll be fine. Like, it'll be okay. Although it will be different. I think it'd be interesting to know, like, this is an experience you and I have, but it would be interesting to know what is a 20-year career as a dentist. Do you move every 3 years? Like the people I know in the military, they move every couple of years.
Yeah.
Is that a big deal to you? Do you like the idea of choosing your location and having more permanence, of owning a practice in one place and the kids go to the same school and you live in the same house? There's, like you said, other factors that will kind of help make that decision.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a really good question. Okay, last question here. This comes from a general dentist in Florida. Another beautiful place. I've only been there once. I like Florida. He says, I'm 18 months into a startup. I'm a single owner GP, and I want to know if now is a good time to start working with you guys. I do 680 in collections and tracking for 750 this year. So he's asking, the general question is, when do I know it's time to hire an advisor? And I thought maybe we could... first of all, we did an episode on this. Actually, if you go to our website, dentistadvisors.com, and click on the education library at the top, it'll bring you to every podcast and article, everything we've ever written. You can filter through that. There's a filter. It's the one on the left. Just find the thing that says advisor. And there's like 8 podcasts and articles on what to ask an advisor, when to hire one, what they charge typically, what the nature of working with an advisor is like, how to set expectations. So there's a lot of resources on there if you check it out. One that we specifically did was episode 58, when is it time to hire an advisor? So
I think there's a right reason to hire us, and there's a wrong reason to hire us too. I think there's a right reason to hire an advisor and a wrong reason to hire an advisor. And one of the good reasons to hire an advisor is because you see, you've gotten to a point and you've matured to a point where you see the value of spending your time in building your practice properly. Like, if you see the value of, hey, if I can take this from 680 in collections to 850, or if I can go from 850 to $1 million, or $1 million to 1.2, or 1.2 to 1.5, most people that get to a point to hire us, they see how growing their business doesn't change the level of stress that they're going to have if they outsource and delegate. Yeah. So if they outsource and delegate things like marketing consulting or practice management or insurance collections or bookkeeping, payroll services, some consulting, legal work, financial planning, investment management, 401k administration. Like, if you're willing to like outsource a lot of the things that some people are just unwilling to, then you know that growing your practice, focusing on the things that only you can do to grow your practice, which is improving your clinical competency, improving the speed at which you can deliver a high quality experience for your patients, and continue to grow the size of your practice through either expanding your hygiene department, or adding associates, or adding locations, or adding operatories, or adding services. And that involves you spending uniquely
that no one else can do for you.
Yeah,
no, you can't outsource that.
And you need to both build your personal competency as a business owner and as a clinician, as well as spend time in marketing. Like, you can't just outsource marketing. Marketing won't do itself, and you have to understand how to test different channels, how to experiment with different budgets. And spending time on marketing and clinical and practice management is really the thing that will grow your wealth the fastest. Once people realize that, then they realize that hiring a financial advisor is actually one of the least expensive things that they could do with their money, because it is what we charge is directly proportional to the amount of complexity that you're dealing with at any given time along the way. So, for example, let's just say that you come to a fiduciary fee-only advisor like us, and we have a flat fee that you have to pay for us to do 10 or 12 different tasks for you throughout the year. We're going to look at tax planning. We're going to look at retirement accounts. We're going to look at investments, insurance, personal savings, personal spending, debt reduction, practice valuation, practice statistics. We're going to look at everything. We're going to charge a flat amount per year. That's probably the equivalent for most of you of doing like 10 crowns. Okay? Like, it's probably the equivalent for most of you of doing like between 7 and 11 crowns. Okay? Now, or seeing 15 to 24 comprehensive exams plus, like, it's a very small part of your annual workload. Okay.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to put it.
It's probably like it might be like,
we cost you 7 crowns a year.
We cost you like 3
implants
days of really like low profitability dentistry. So 3 days of like,
in a whole year,
you're going to have to work 3 days to pay for your financial advisor so that you don't have to deal with any of the financial stuff that he coordinates for you with your CPA, your attorney, your consultant, your bookkeeper, your office manager. Your financial planner is going to do all this stuff for you, but you're going to have to work for a few days to pay for that. I think that for most people, by making that choice early in their career, at the point that they know they want to grow, at the point you want to be larger than you're at now, I think that the time you don't want to hire a financial advisor is when you're declining in collections, at the peak of your career, winding down, and there's not really a lot of time to where the involvement of a financial advisor can make a huge difference. So if you're 3 years away from retiring and you're hiring a financial advisor, they can help you, no question. And I'm not saying you shouldn't reach out.
Probably decades ahead of making the right tax decisions and withdrawal decisions and account investment decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've missed out on 20 years of compounded growth that you could achieve by making smarter decisions than you probably made. And I just think that we see that the time to hire a financial advisor is when someone's consciously chosen to grow and start to delegate. And not a lot of people are there. Like, there's just a lot of people who are not mentally in a position where they are outsourcing. They're they're trying to keep their cards really close to their chest.
Yeah.
They're trying to do as much as they can to reduce every expense. And philosophically, I mean, not everyone's listening to this, so they're not going to get this message. But like, I know that holds people back. Like, that tendency that a business owner has to say, I'm just going to do that because it's
the biggest way for me to increase my
income,
my margin or my equity in something is to just reduce expenses instead of grow the value.
Yeah. And I just think that's the time when mentally you believe that is the time to hire a financial advisor. And I'm saying that because I know that many of you are not there right now. You'd literally look at the tasks of what financial planning is, and you don't understand them well enough to really care. But as your situation gets busier and more complex, it becomes more obvious, and then you'll really know. But I like that the person who's asking this question is probably they're just catching this earlier than most people would catch
18 months into
it.
a startup. Yeah.
You know, mentally they're starting to think about it and go, you know, and I think there's just a laundry list of items that we won't go through on today's show, but that really do save a ton of time.
Yeah.
And I think the time to hire someone's when you're ready to grow beyond where you're at. The last bullet I'd like to add to that question is, if your practice is not paying you at least the fair wage that you would make as an associate. So if I look at that $750,000 in collections and you're not even making 30% of that, it's probably not time to hire a financial advisor. It's probably time to start a relationship with one, to know who you're going to hire. But that financial advisor should be telling you to get some help in the practice, right? The financial advisor should be, in this case, it looks like he's growing fine, right?
Might not
so
be an issue.
it just might be early.
Yeah.
But if you're stagnant and stuck and you're making literally like 30% of your collections total, you don't have a healthy practice yet. And I think you have some consulting work left ahead of you that would be a better use. Instead of investing money in public markets, in investing money in a 401k or investing money in a brokerage account, as long as you got a little bit of liquidity, you know, maybe 3 to 6 months worth of cash backup, and many of you might not have that because you're struggling. If you don't have that, you just know there's consulting that to fix a practice. There's problems with your hygiene department. There's problems with your insurance collections. There's problem with your AR
processes.
There's problem with your billing and processes
fees.
and everything. Those need to be fixed before you hire a financial planner. But if you're making even a 10% profit beyond your normal associate production percentage, so if you're making 30% of your collections plus you got 10% left in profit, I mean, even at that point, it's probably time to start.
It's a healthy business.
Yeah, it's a healthy enough business to get a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And even if you have no liquidity and no income, that's not the point. Most people wait to hire a financial advisor until they have money, because they're like, well, I don't want to go to a financial planner if I don't have a portfolio. Because the industry has convinced people that until they have the minimums they need, like you got to have $500,000 or you can't talk to a financial advisor, or you better have $1 million or you can't talk to a financial advisor. Or my limits are $1 million. I'm sorry, I won't talk to you unless you have at least $1 million.
Yeah.
Or we're $3 million and up.
Except then you go look through the clients, you're like, they don't have $1 million.
You're like, well, okay, if you average your clients that you publicly are disclosing online and divide it by the amount of money you say you manage, it looks to me like your minimum's more like $10,000. So anyway, there's a lot of games that financial advisors will play, like to position themselves as kind of high end in the market. Like, yeah, we're only really working with people with 5 million or more. It's like,
maybe that's new though.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, that's not a business who can only service the rich. Like, if you can only service people that are loaded, I mean, you're not helping like 92% of the population. And so the way we've tried to structure things is we expect many of our clients to come to us with very little assets. The exception is when someone comes that has significant wealth and feels like they need to make some adjustments. That's probably 20 to 25% of the time. But 75% of the time, most people are going, is it really time to start hiring an advisor? Because I'm not that wealthy and I really don't have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And that's precisely the time when you need to start that advisor relationship, because you want to get started you want to avoid the mistakes that everyone else makes along the way. And you don't want those mistakes to be the reason you hire an advisor. You want to avoid them in the first place. And so I just think it's important for people to realize that there's these two times. I would say pragmatically, don't hire someone if your practice is really, really struggling.
Yeah.
If you have no free cash flow and you're not able to accumulate any liquidity, then it's still a practice problem at that point.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start getting to the point where you're like, I've got a little bit extra money. Should I pay down my student loan? Should I put it into an UTMA for the kids? Should I put it into a brokerage account? Should I start my 401k? Should I, then it's time.
If you're asking yourselves those questions, that's a good indicator.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Again, we would love for you to keep asking questions for the next Q&A show. So go to dentistadvisors.com, click on the podcast tab, right? And then what's the button say? There's a big button on there.
So submit question to podcast.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Not for me. I would be confused by that button.
He was confused by it. I click it all the time.
I'd be like, what do I do with this?
Submit a question. Submit a question. So submit a question. We'd love to hear from you. Check out the new website. Like we were talking about before, there's a lot of resources on there dentistadvisors.com. We have the education library at the top. You can filter through any topic. There's also an intro series. So right when you go to the homepage, there's a big button as well that says watch intro series. And that'll walk you through, how many videos are on there? Like 6 or 7 short ones. They're not long. They're not painful. Very short, and walk you through our process, our philosophy, our pricing.
When to hire an advisor.
Yeah, everything. All these questions. If you'd like to talk to us, you can click on the link that'll book a free consultation. We'd love to answer your questions in more detail and hear about your situation. Or you can call us at 833-DDS-PLAN, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Carry on.
Did you get
I think
pictures?
so. Plus, like,
We're good.
plus that first question, we can take it from 35 minutes down to 20, 18 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, it'll still be the longest.
Did you get pictures, Jeff?
Yeah, we got pictures.
Okay.
Do we need
We need an intro, Reese.
Okay, let me stop all the cameras before.